Jack wasn't the kind of man you forget easily. He had this disarming smile, the kind that made you feel like he was letting you in on some harmless little secret. That's how it started with us. Easy smiles, lingering stares, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally found someone who wouldn't disappoint me. Joyce, that's me. I wasn't looking for something perfect, just real. But as I'd come to learn, real doesn't always mean right. We met at this little community bookshop I managed downtown. He'd walked in wearing a rain-soaked hoodie and a look like he had all the time in the world. I offered him coffee, and he offered a story, something about missing his train, which later I found out was a lie. But back then, it sounded charming. Jack became a regular. Then he became my late-night phone call. Then the warm body I fell asleep next to. It was fast. Too fast if I'm being honest with myself now. But isn't that how the worst ones get you? They make it feel like fate. At first, everything felt aligned. He made me laugh when the world felt grey. He remembered how I liked my toast, lightly burnt with strawberry jam. He'd write me notes and hide them in the books I'd lend him. I'd find them while shelving. Tiny things like "You're the highlight of my day," or "Page 47 is as beautiful as you." Corny? Maybe, but I believed him. I wanted to. Then came the late replies, the "sorry I fell asleep" texts, the moments where I'd ask him something, and he'd blink like he had to remember who I was. I brushed them off at first. Work stress maybe. Or maybe I was just being paranoid. That's what love does to you. It makes you doubt your gut. And then came Marlene. She wasn't supposed to be a threat. Just someone from Jack's past, who'd suddenly started appearing again. He'd mention her casually, like it meant nothing. "Oh, Marlene messaged me today. Remember her from college?" Or, "I ran into Marlene at that Thai place on 8th. Always delivered with a shrug. But my gut, the one I had silenced for him, started to scream. One night, we were supposed to go out for dinner. He cancelled last minute. Said Douglas needed him. His old buddy from school. But something in his voice didn't sit right. It was too rehearsed. Too neat. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed him. I told myself it was just to ease my mind. Just to prove I was being silly. But what I saw didn't feel silly at all. He wasn't with Douglas. He was with Marlene, sitting across from her at the Thai place he claimed to run into her at. They weren't laughing like old friends. They were talking like people who shared something they didn't want the world to know. And then she reached across the table, touched his hand, and he didn't pull away. I didn't go inside. I didn't confront them. I stood outside in the cold, rain drizzling over my coat, watching the pieces of my illusion shatter like glass. I went home, sat on the floor of my apartment, and let it all out. The rage, the sadness, the shame. Because that's what betrayal does. It makes you question not just the other person, but yourself. How did I not see it? How did I let it go this far? He came by later that night, drenched and full of excuses. Said he was just helping her with something. Said it was all innocent. Said I was overreacting. And for a second, I almost believed him again. Almost. But something inside me clicked. Not snapped. Clicked. Like a door unlocking. I realized I didn't need proof. I didn't need a confession. I didn't need to hear him say it. I already knew. I just looked at him, dead in the eye, and said, "You tested my patience with betrayal. I'm done proving my worth. I pass by letting you go." He stood there, stunned. Maybe he thought I'd scream or cry or beg. But I was done bleeding for someone who wouldn't even admit they held the knife. He tried to speak, but I walked. Away first, and I didn't look back. The days after Jack left were quiet, but not the kind of quiet that brings peace. It was the type that wraps itself around your chest and sits there, heavy. I kept moving, sorting books, sweeping the shop, pretending like everything was normal. But inside, I was unraveling, not because I missed him. No, not really. But because I missed the version of me that trusted, that believed. Marlene tried calling me. Twice. I didn't answer. What could she possibly say? That she didn't mean to. That she didn't know he was mine. That it just happened. I didn't want her apologies. And I sure as hell didn't want her excuses. Jack was the one I held accountable. But Marlene knew what she was doing too. She saw me post him, talk about him, laugh with him. She smiled in my face and stole behind my back. I'd known women like her before. The ones who needed attention, no matter where it came from. It was Douglas who showed up at the bookstore, out of nowhere. I hadn't seen him in years. Jack's old friend, the one he supposedly met that night. Douglas and I were never close, but we were friendly. He always had this calm presence. Like he saw through people, but never said much about it. He asked if I had a minute, and I hesitated, but I nodded. We sat near the back, by the poetry section. He didn't waste time. He said, "Jack's been lying to a lot of people, Joyce. Not just you." That hit hard. Even now, a part of me hoped it was just me, just a misstep. But hearing that confirmed what I didn't want to accept. He wasn't just a man who made a mistake. He was a man who was a mistake. Douglas looked down at the floor, then back up at me. He was seeing her for months. I didn't say anything, because it wasn't my place. But after seeing what it did to you, I swallowed hard, fingers curling around the edge of my chair. "He told you not to tell me." He nodded slowly. "He said you'd overreact, that you'd take it too personally." I laughed, a bitter, cold sound I barely recognized as mine. Overreact. That was always Jack's favorite word when I called him out. I didn't know what stung more, his betrayal, or the fact that he thought I wouldn't do anything about it, that I'd just roll over and take it, like some fool waiting for her man to choose her. Douglas stayed a while. He didn't push me to talk, didn't offer empty comfort. He just sat there. And maybe that's why I started opening up. I told him about the night I saw them, the way Jack's eyes used to make me feel safe, the way I felt like I was slipping out of my own skin, since it all fell apart. Douglas didn't interrupt. He just listened, like really listened. And when I was done, he said something I'll never forget. "You didn't lose Jack. You lost the idea of him. And that's a hell of a thing to grieve, Joyce. But it's not love if you're the only one bleeding for it." That night, I lay in bed thinking about those words. I hadn't cried since the night it happened. I wasn't even sure I still could. But something cracked open inside me. Not sadness, not anger. Just this overwhelming tiredness from carrying someone else's lies on my back for too long. I started journaling again, like I used to before Jack. Every night, I wrote a letter I never intended to send. To him. To myself. To the girl I used to be, before she believed in someone like Jack. And with every word, I felt lighter, not healed, but less haunted. About a week later, I bumped into Marlene. She didn't expect to see me, and her face went pale like a ghost caught in the act. We were both walking out of a small coffee shop on Main, and there we were, face to face, no place to hide. She started to speak, lips trembling. "Joyce, I held up a hand. "Don't, just don't." There was nothing she could say that would fix what she helped break, and I wasn't looking for closure from her. I already had it. She looked like she wanted to cry, and maybe part of me wanted her to, but I didn't feel angry anymore. Just done. I walked away, again, and this time it felt good. Spring came in slow, hesitant waves, the kind of season that doesn't know whether it wants to bloom or freeze. I understood that feeling better than I cared to admit. I was somewhere between healing and hurting, still caught in that strange middle place where everything feels raw but manageable. The bookstore kept me grounded. Routine does that to a person. But there were moments, quiet ones, where Jack's absence echoed louder than I wanted. One morning, I was shelving a batch of new arrivals when Douglas came in again. He didn't say anything at first, just browsed through the shelves like he was genuinely interested. Then, as I reached for a book above my head, he gently said, "You've got a coffee in your future, if you're not too busy." I turned and looked at him, one eyebrow raised. "That your smooth way of asking me out?" He chuckled. "Nope. Just asking a friend to take a break." There was no pressure in his tone. That's what I liked about Douglas. He didn't need to impress anyone. He didn't try too hard. With Jack, I always felt like he was performing, always playing the role of the man he thought I wanted. Douglas didn't play anything. He just was. So we went, just a block down, sat outside, sipped our drinks, talked. About nothing at first. Weather, the shop, local gossip. Then something shifted. He asked me about the night Jack and I first met, and for the first time since it all fell apart, I let myself remember it without bitterness. "It was raining," I said. He walked in like he owned the sky. Douglas smiled at that, not unkindly. "Sounds like him," I nodded. He knew exactly what to say, exactly how to say it. I didn't even stand a chance. He looked down thoughtful. "Do you think he ever really loved you?" That question hung between us like smoke. I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to. But after everything, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I think he loved how I made him feel. Not me. Just the version of himself he liked when he was with me. Douglas didn't respond right away. He just leaned back in his chair and let me sit in my truth. No rescue, no contradiction, just silence that said, "I hear you." When I got home, that evening, there was an envelope taped to my apartment door. No name, no address, just a single piece of paper inside with Jack's handwriting on it. "You were right to walk away. I wasn't man enough to hold on to something real. I hope someday you'll understand." I sat with that note for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt this strange mix of pity and finality. Jack was still trying to frame it like I didn't understand, like I'd missed something. But the truth was, I understood everything. I saw through him now, in a way I never could when I was under his spell. The next morning, I tossed the note in the trash. From that point on, Douglas and I started seeing each other more often. Not in a romantic way. Not yet. We weren't rushing anything. It was nice, though, having someone to laugh with again. Someone who didn't make me question my worth every time I looked in their eyes. He was calm, grounded, and slowly, without even trying, he was helping me rebuild something in myself. One night, we closed up the shop together. He'd started volunteering on weekends, just helping out. As we locked the door and stepped onto the sidewalk, he turned to me and said, "You know, I think Jack was right about one thing." I raised an eyebrow. That's a dangerous way to start a sentence. Douglas grinned. He wasn't man enough to hold on to something real. But you were always the real thing. That one hit different. Not because I needed to hear it, but because for the first time, I believed it. Summer rolled in, like it had something to prove. Heat wave after heat wave. The kind that made the pavement shimmer, and the air hum. Life was quieter now, in a steady, healing kind of way. I had my routines, the shop, my journals, and Douglas. He was still just around, not pushing, not pulling, just there. Like a lighthouse when the tide's gone mad. He came by one Saturday with ice cream. 2 scoops of mango for me, just vanilla for him. He always remembered the little things. I didn't even like mango ice cream that much, but now it had started to taste like peace. That afternoon, we sat on the curb outside the bookstore, melting cones in hand, people passing by like we were a scene in someone else's story. At one point, he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Do you think you'll ever let someone in again?" I knew what he meant. He wasn't asking if I'd love him, at least, not directly. He was asking if I could ever trust again. And that answer didn't come easy. "I want to," I said after a beat. "But I don't want to be a fool twice." He nodded slowly, like he understood too well. "That's fair." I looked at him. His calm eyes. The steady way he held his eye. Space. "But if I do, it'll be with someone who doesn't make me feel like I'm waiting for a storm." He smiled. "Then I'll make sure I never bring an umbrella." That was Douglas. Corny, sweet, safe. And after so much chaos, safe felt good. But part of me was still scared to let the walls down all the way. Jack had left cracks in places I didn't know could break. I wasn't trying to protect myself from Douglas. I was trying to protect myself from myself. The part of me that believed lies wrapped in love. A few days later, Jack texted me. "Saw you with Douglas. Hope you're happy now." No hello, no apology. Just that. I stared at the message, felt the familiar spark of irritation in my chest. He was still playing the victim in his own disaster. I didn't respond. I didn't owe him words. But the nerve of him, like he hadn't torn me apart and expected me to stay in pieces. That same night, I got a call from Marlene. I don't know what made me answer. Curiosity maybe. Or just needing to hear how deep the rabbit hole went. "Joyce," she said, her voice trembling. "He's been doing it to me too." I didn't say anything. I let her talk. She told me about the late nights, the distance, the excuses. It was like hearing my own story echo back to me. Only this time, she was the one being slowly broken. She was crying by the time she said, "I should have believed you. I should have never—" "Marlene," I cut in gently. "We both should have known better, but we didn't. Now we do." She asked if we could meet, maybe talk in person. I told her no. Not because I was angry anymore, but because I was finally free. And I didn't want to sit in old pain just to prove I was over it. She wasn't ready to leave him, and I wasn't going back there, not even in conversation. The next morning, I told Douglas everything about the message, the call, the way Jack was still trying to infect the spaces I had reclaimed. Douglas didn't say anything at first. He just reached across the cafe table and took my hand, fingers warm against mine. "You don't owe anyone your healing timeline, but I'm here for whatever it looks like." That small act, that quiet reassurance. It said more than all of Jack's grand words ever had. Later that night, I wrote in my journal, "Love doesn't look like saving someone from themselves. It looks like saving yourself and finding someone who never asks you to explain the bruises." I was healing, slowly, honestly, and maybe, just maybe, I was starting to believe that not everyone wanted to hurt me. The air had started to soften by late July, evenings turning golden, with a kind of light that made everything look a little kinder. I found myself smiling more, without needing a reason. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the bookstore window and not recognize myself. Not because I looked different, but because the weight I used to carry on my shoulders wasn't there anymore. That invisible tension, the need to always be alert, to always be bracing for disappointment. It was fading. Douglas had slowly become a fixture in my life. Not because he tried to be, but because he fit. Like a well-worn book that still had stories left in it. He never tried to fix me, never asked for more than I was willing to give. We'd close the shop together some nights, sharing leftovers or cheap takeout, talking about everything and nothing. It felt easy. And after everything, easy was revolutionary. One night while cleaning up, he paused by the front desk and asked, "What would you do if Jack came back tomorrow and begged for a second chance?" The question knocked the air out of me, not because I hadn't thought about it, but because I hadn't let myself answer it. "I'd wish him peace," I said quietly, "and then I'd shut the door." Douglas nodded. No trace of jealousy or ego, just quiet respect. That's more grace than I'd have. But it wasn't grace, it was clarity. A few days later, something strange happened. A girl came into the shop, young, maybe 19 or 20, big eyes, anxious smile, carrying a worn notebook. She wondered for a while, then finally approached me at the counter. "You're Joyce, right?" she asked softly. I nodded. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I think you used to date Jack." I felt the ground shift. "Yes," I said carefully. "Why?" She looked like she'd been holding her breath for days. I think I'm with him now, and I don't know if I'm crazy or if something's wrong. He talks about you sometimes, like he still misses you." God, she was so young, and her voice. It had the same uncertainty mine used to have when I was trying to convince myself I wasn't being used. I didn't attack him. I didn't speak badly about her choices. I just said what I wish someone had told me when I was her. "He'll make you feel like you're imagining things, like you're asking too much for wanting the truth. But trust yourself. If something feels off, it is." Her eyes watered and I saw it. She already knew. She was just waiting for someone else to validate her pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered, looking ashamed. I reached out gently. "Don't be. Just don't lose yourself, trying to love someone who won't do the same for you." She left with a quiet thank you, and I stood there behind the counter for a long time after, heart heavy with a sadness I didn't expect. Not for Jack, for her, for every woman who thought she could change a man by loving him harder, for every version of me that used to believe the same. That night, I didn't journal. I just sat on the floor of my apartment, lights low, tea untouched, and I let the silence settle. Not empty, just still, peaceful. And I realized something. I wasn't just healing from what Jack did to me. I was healing from who I had to become. Because of him, the doubt, the fear, the way I used to apologize, just for feeling hurt. Douglas called around 10, just to say goodnight. I told him what happened, about the girl, about what I told her. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "You probably changed her life, Joyce." I closed my eyes and leaned back. I just told her the truth. He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "You've got a strength most people never find. Even after everything, you still choose honesty." I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like me again. Late August brought with it a warmth that wasn't just in the air. Things around me had shifted, not just physically, but emotionally too. My world had space now. Space where Jack used to live rent-free in my thoughts. Space for peace, for real connection. For me, Douglas and I had started spending more weekends together. We weren't calling it anything, and I liked that. There was no pressure to define it. No invisible deadline hanging over us like with Jack. Just soft, quiet. Hours. Coffee at his place. Reading side by side. Laughing at bad movies. I didn't know what to call it, but I knew how it made me feel. Safe, real, and seen. One Saturday morning, we took a drive to the coast. Just a spontaneous decision after breakfast. He said he needed air. I said I needed water. 2 hours later, we were sitting on a rocky edge overlooking the sea, our shoes off, jeans rolled up, salt in our hair, the kind of day that feels like it's saying, "You've survived enough, rest here a while." He turned to me at one point, watching the waves. "You ever think you'd get here? Here as in the beach?" I teased. He smiled. "No, here as in not drowning anymore." That question sat with me. I pulled my knees up to my chest, wrapping my arms around them. I didn't think I'd get through it without bitterness. That was the hardest part, not letting what Jack did turn me cold. Douglas nodded. "You didn't. That's rare." I looked at him, wind playing with his hair, the way his eyes stayed steady on me. "You helped," he shrugged. "You would have found your way either way." I don't know what it was about that moment. Maybe it was the ocean. Maybe it was the fact that I hadn't flinched at Jack's name in weeks. Or maybe it was the way Douglas didn't need me to be anything other than myself. But something inside me softened completely. Later, when we drove back, he reached over and took my hand for the first time. Not like a question, not like a move, just quietly. Like he'd been waiting for me to be ready, and I was. The following week, Jack showed up. I was locking up the shop late. Almost 9. Street was quiet. The air had cooled. I heard someone say my name and turned to find him standing there, like a memory I never asked to revisit. "Joyce." I didn't say anything, just looked at him. He looked tired. Not in the way a man looks after a long day, but in the way someone looks when their lives have started caving in. I was in the area," he said. "Just wanted to see how you were." I crossed my arms. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because I miss you." I almost laughed. Almost. "You miss control. You miss being someone in my life who could show up and expect me to stop everything." He stepped closer. "I made mistakes. I know that now. I was scared. I wasn't ready for what we had." I stared at him for a long second. "You were ready enough to lie, to cheat, to gaslight me into thinking I was the problem." His mouth opened, then closed again. That was the thing about Jack. He never prepared for the moment people stopped needing him. "I don't want anything from you," he finally said, voice low. I wanted to apologize." I tilted my head slightly. "You want forgiveness?" "No," he whispered. "I want peace." I breathed in slowly, then gave him a small nod. "Then go find it, but not here." I turned and walked away. I didn't wait for him to leave. I didn't check to see if he was watching, because it didn't matter anymore. He could live in guilt, or he could live in denial. It wasn't mine to carry, not anymore. When I got home, Douglas was already there, waiting on the couch with a book in his lap and a glass of wine for me on the table. He looked up as I walked in. "Everything okay?" I sat down beside him, took the wine, and leaned into his shoulder. "Yeah," I said softly. "Everything's finally okay." And for the first time, I meant it. September brought cooler winds and a quiet sense of closure that drifted in with the falling leaves. It felt like the world around me was slowing down just enough to match my heart. There were no more lingering questions, no unfinished conversations, waiting to explode. Just the gentle silence of things, finally settling. The bookstore was busy again. School season, book clubs, tourists stumbling in for the smell of old pages. I moved through it all with this strange, beautiful calm, like I'd stepped into a life that no longer carried someone else's weight. Jack had faded into something I used to know, not someone I missed, not even someone I hated, just someone who taught me what I would never tolerate again. Douglas became something more. It happened so naturally, we didn't even talk about it. One night he stayed over after we'd both fallen asleep, watching an old film. The next morning, he made breakfast in my kitchen like it was the most normal thing in the world. He moved with ease, pouring coffee, buttering toast, and I just stood there in my robe watching him, smiling like a fool. He noticed. "What?" he asked, grinning, holding up a slice of burnt toast. I shrugged. "You just look like you belong here." He gave me a soft look. Because I do. It didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel like a rebound or a distraction. It felt earned. Like we'd both lived through enough to finally appreciate something real. One evening, as we were closing the shop, I found an envelope slipped under the door. No name, again. Just like before. I felt a little chill crawl up my back as I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Me and Jack. From last year. Smiling. Happy. On the back, in his handwriting. I had it all. I ruined it. That's my punishment. I stared at it for a moment. Not in sadness. Not in anger. Just observation. He was still trying to remind me of what he'd lost. But I had nothing left to give him. Not even reaction. I walked over to the trash and dropped it in. Douglas watched me do it. That from him. I nodded. "You okay?" I thought about it. For a second. I'm more than okay. And I was. Because I wasn't flinching anymore. Jack's presence, his letters, his photos, his ghost, didn't hold any power over me now. He could write 1,000 apologies, and not one of them would undo what he did. I had mourned the version of me that loved him. Now I was someone else, someone better, stronger, wiser. That weekend, Douglas and I drove upstate. Just a short trip, trees turning golden red, hills rolling out like something from a painting. We found this tiny cabin near a lake and stayed for 2 nights. No phones, no distractions, just each other. The second night by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, he looked at me and said, "You've changed." I turned toward him. "How so?" "You're not looking over your shoulder anymore," he said. "You're not waiting for something to fall apart." I rested my head against his chest. "Because I'm not scared anymore. I already fell apart, and I survived it." He kissed my forehead and didn't say another word. He didn't need to. That night, I dreamed of nothing. No shadows, no old memories, just soft darkness and warmth. And when I woke up, his arm was still around me, still there, still steady. October came dressed in gold, the wind cool and sharp, carrying with it a sense that something had finally come full circle. The leaves outside the shop floated down in lazy spirals, piling like reminders that even the most beautiful things are meant to fall sometimes. I'd stopped expecting closure from other people. Jack never gave it, not truly, and I no longer needed it. I had my own now. My peace wasn't tied to someone else's apology. It was in my morning coffee, in Douglas's steady voice, in the sound of the bookstore bell when another customer walked in and I smiled without pretending. One afternoon, Douglas found an old vinyl record player at a flea market. He cleaned it up, bought a stack of scratched-up records, and surprised me at the shop after closing. He set it up right by the counter and said, "We're giving the bookstore a soundtrack." The first song he played was low and bluesy, something slow with heart. We danced there, just the two of us, surrounded by stories on shelves. My forehead against his collarbone, his hand pressed gently on the small of my back. It wasn't perfect. There were days when I still felt the sting of memory, like muscle pain after a deep wound, a smell, a song, even just the quiet. Those things could still wake something sharp inside me, but I didn't run from it anymore. I let the ache pass, through like a wave, and kept moving. Marlene messaged me again. This time, it wasn't an apology. It was a thank you. I finally left him. Your words. They stuck with me. I kept reading them over and over. I'm sorry again, Joyce. I hope you're happy. I read the message and realized I didn't feel hate. Not even irritation. Just this deep, quiet hope that she'd learn from it like I did, that she'd stop picking men who fed on her softness. I replied only once. Healing is hard. Be kind to yourself. You don't owe anyone your ruin. That was it. No need for more. I'd said what needed saying. That night, Douglas and I made dinner at my place. Something simple. Roasted vegetables, baked fish, too much wine. After we ate, we sat on the couch, legs tangled, plates forgotten on the coffee table. He ran his hand along my arm and said softly, "Do you think you're ready to love again?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because I was trying to find the right words. "I think I already do," I whispered. But this time, it's not love out of fear or desperation. It's not love because I'm scared to be alone or because I'm trying to prove I'm worthy. It's love because it feels good and safe and steady. He didn't smile like a man who'd won something. He smiled like a man who understood what it took for me to get there. "I love you too," he said. And that was the first time either of us had said it. Not during sex, not in the middle of some grand moment, just here, in the realness of ordinary. We didn't talk about Jack anymore after that. There was no need. He was a story I had finished, a chapter that taught me something, hurt me deeply, and yet freed me. I passed his street a few times. Once saw him on a bench looking down at his phone, like he was waiting for something that wasn't coming. Maybe a new girl, maybe the old, me. Either way, I didn't stop, because letting go wasn't a one-time thing. It was choosing, every day, not to reopen wounds, just to prove they existed. One night, curled beside Douglas, I whispered. He tested my patience with betrayal, and I passed by letting him go. Douglas kissed my shoulder, and look what you found instead. I smiled in the dark. Not what I found, what I finally made space for. The end. If you'd like another story or title batch, just give me a new keyword anytime.